Hello everyone, my name is Shalev Alon. I'm a music mixing engineer for video game, music, and TV. I've worked on several different shows, video games, films with different studios like Tencent, Fox, Netflix, Disney. Um, Many of the video games and many of the film that you probably played or saw. Some of them I either worked on the score or maybe on the trailer, or basically any music content that was related to this product. I wanted to go over a little bit about basically music specifically for video games and how to work with a template for video games, how to receive the recording from an orchestra, and how to basically make it work so your audio department, the one that you work with, if it's for a video game or for a film or for any other media, basically will be easy for you to just work and give them all the files and all the content that they need. If it's submixes, if it's stems, and so on. So let's just get right to it. Okay, so before we basically start the session, and I want to let you hear the track itself before we even go deep into it. So this is a track. Let's listen to it. Okay, so let's go over the template super quick. So let's go over the template, which I think is the most important thing that I wanted to go over, since this is very important. So for how you deliver to the people that you work with, and especially for video game, it's very important because there's a lot of submixes to deliver, since there's many places that your music can be played, and of course there's all the loop structure that as a composer you write it in a specific structure, so it will be easy for them to implement the music in different part of the video game. So basically what you will need to deliver and what will be best, especially if you're recording live musicians, is to deliver all the specific submixes and those stems in the least amount of actions that you can do. So everything will be in one session, so you will have control on everything. So let's start with the group. So we have, as you can see, I basically organized everything in folders here. I have strings, brass, woodwind, rhythm, percussion, vocals, effects, and synths. So let's just see, before I even go to specific instruments and what I did EQ-wise, reverb-wise, and how I treated the Deca tree, the surround mics, the rooms mics. I want to go over on the template to see basically how we can deliver. So what I have here in every group, let's just open the strings, for example. So I have the strings, and all of them basically, I'll go a little bit deeper later on the subgroups that I have here. But basically all the groups that I have here and all the channels that I have here, all of them going to this folder called strings. Now these strings, basically this folder, go to a few auxes, and I'll show you exactly where it is. Let's active this folder, which called the alt mixes folder. So here I have all of the alt mixes. What's this? All right. So as you can see, for every folder I have an audio track, which basically all of the instruments and all of the folder that are in the instrument basically goes to a specific audio track. Now, this audio track for each individual folder basically goes together to alt mixes. Now, it depends, of course, on your projects, and it depends which mixes but they're looking for. But in a lot of the basically of the video games and the way you write the music, there's different kind of ways that they want to deliver the submixes. For example, it can be percussion and strings, or strings and brass, or just woodwind and strings, or just synths and percussion, or just I don't know, rhythm and brass. It can be a lot of different submixes that they're looking for. So this is why I created those four auxes, which is basically the alt mixes. This is another audio track where I print the alt mixes. So for example, let's see. Let's say they said, oh, we want just the orchestra, so strings, brass, and woodwind to basically be a submix. So what I did is delivered, basically, routed all of these three, strings, brass, and woodwind, to, let's see, to alt number one. So all of them go to alt number one. So alt number one, which is this one, I know all of my orchestra basically goes to this audio track, and this is just the mix for the orchestra. Now, basically imagine that just for specific folders. So like if they want the percussion and synth, so I can send both of them to assign them to whatever mix two. Or if they want just the let's say percussion and rhythm, I send both of them as well to a different alt mix as well. And this is how you basically organize it in a way where you have a few different parts where you can basically output to multiple outputs, and output them to multiple tracks basically. So Pro Tools can do that. I'm pretty sure that Cubase can do that, but it depends on your DAW where you can do that. And of course, that will make your life way easier, because then you can basically print everything in one click. Now, the reason why I have this audio track, all of these guys, is basically to control the mix. So let's say I finished my stereo mix on all of the track, which sounded amazing and I like it. But now when they want the alt mix, and they're just maybe looking for, again, strings, brass, and woodwind, then the mix will sound different. Then I will need to adjust some stuff for this specific alt mix. So after I finish and I print my stereo mix, even before I print it, actually, I can adjust these tracks. So let's say it's strings, brass, and woodwind. I can adjust here the volume. I can add some plugins if I need. I can basically create a mix with inside my mix. So I have the whole full mix, which is basically all of these folders, right? And then I have just these three if I want to control just these three folders and change a little bit, maybe the balance or whatever I need, because, you know, as a whole, maybe it sounds as one thing, but when I just work with the strings, brass, and woodwind, maybe the string suddenly comes out a little bit because the percussion kind of like masked it in the stereo mix. But now when they're not playing, because it's just the orchestra mix, then maybe they're more exposed. So I need to maybe bring them down. There's many reasons why you need to change the balance a little bit. This is why you need to create those audio tracks, so you can actually have control on the alt mixes. And after you're happy, again, you send them to, as I mentioned, to the alt mixes, whatever they're looking for. So this is basically the alt mixes and the template that I kind of like zoomed out how the template needs to look like. Now let's zoom in and go back a little bit to the orchestra itself and see what we're talking about here, what we're working with. So this is the strings part, the string folder. Now let's see what we have here. So we have the deca tree. The deca tree, just as a quick explanation, it's basically three mics that sits above the orchestra, left, center, right. And this is basically how you receive them. Now these basically control and picked up all of the orchestra, and I assigned them to the orchestra, to the strings section. So I have the deca, which is all of these. Now let's listen to them super fast. So as you can see, it's basically the whole orchestra. So you have, some bleeding from the brass section, the woodwind, the strings, everything basically picked up in those three mics. And then we have the surround right here. As you can see, the surround, they sound a little bit farther because they're sitting really back in the room. So you have the decatry, which is above all the orchestra, and then you have the surround, which are in the back of the room. After that, we have all the close mics. So close mics for all the low strings, which is basses and cellos. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of pickup from, a lot of bleeding from the brass, because of course it's a very loud instrument. So even on the close mics, you can hear it. Now, let's hear the close high strings, which is violin and viola. Great. And last, we have all the MIDI parts. So for an orchestra, I will definitely say that today, and all the mixes that you hear today are involved with MIDI strings. So everything that involve just to layer whatever you need for your strings, your brass, your piano, everything basically almost is layered by MIDI, because there's some stuff in the MIDI that basically you can't really get from live players if you want that big size and the impact of the orchestra, because again, MIDI has their own advantage. Of course, always, 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 you put the orchestra in the front because that's the most important thing. But you can definitely put in the back, and it's kind of like a fundamental and like kind of like a blanket. This is the base of all the low frequencies and all of the basically the tone, maybe a little bit of coloration. So I basically mix the live orchestra first, and after I'm very happy with it, I just put it a little bit. Again, it's not a very defined sound, but it's definitely work as kind of a bed. So this is how it sounds. Okay, now let's go over, let's go up all the way to the deca and see what I did here. So deca tree, as I mentioned, it's center, left, right. So I start, of course, with the panning, and I go center and left for the deca L, and then deca R is right. And that's basically apply for everything. So surround, I go left, all the way left, and surround right, I go all the way right, and so on and on. And after I finish my panning, same thing with the basses, with violin, violas, everything. After I finish the panning, I start to do the balance just by ear. So I kind of like started to blend the deca. I was like, okay, honestly left, center, right, I don't touch it because it's three mics that sit in a perfect balance already in the recording, so I don't touch it balance wise and volume wise, and I was very happy. So that was great for me. And then surround, now in surround, as you can see, I did a little bit volume, but I mean 0.1 honestly, because There was barely a difference between them because again they were sitting in the same placement, same distance from the orchestra, so usually there's no reason to touch the levels. Um, and after that, I started to basically blend in each individual mic, the solo mics. So let's do bass, sorry, the close mics. And that's basically you just go one by one, and then viola, violin, viola, viola, violin, and so on. And after we basically finish that, and I'm very happy with the balance, so I actually start to work on the sound of it. And the sound of it is there's a lot to speak about recording and how they sound and how they should sound like. Uh, but again, when you record live orchestra and when it was recorded good, there's actually more of a manual type of work that you need to do, which is balance, panning, volume automation, maybe of course reverb setting and reverb automation. But it's mainly just creating the room and creating the balance and creating the dynamic of it instead of start to mess around with the color of it or maybe with saturations or different type of coloration plugins, I'll say, because there's no reason. Like the color is already there. It received it from the mic. It received it from the room, from the player. So you don't really need to use it. Of course, if the track was arranged correctly and the sound choicement was basically correct and worked with each other frequency wise and melody wise, that the bass didn't interrupt the, let's say, the cello solo, or maybe the melody didn't interrupt the percussion. So after you have all of that, you know that the recording gonna basically just uplift everything. So let's just go over super quick on what I did, because honestly there's not much that I needed to do plugin wise. So we have the Deca, and I just opened basically a high pass on all three of them. Same thing. I just cut the 3800s and down because I don't need that. I definitely um, uh, have a lot of low end coming from a lot of mics, so I start to cut it just to make it clean, because there's a lot of rumble that comes from an orchestra that you don't need. So that's one. Surround, same thing. You definitely don't need this, so I cut all of it. Second, cellos, you can see no plugins at all. The only thing that I routed all of them to a bus that's called cello, and it's here. And honestly, what I did here is just to control the volume of it after I did my automation. So not even an EQ, like no EQ, because it recorded so well. Next, same thing, violin. Let me just do this super quick. So basically what I did to all of them, same thing, just cut, maybe boost a little bit of some specific frequencies, but most of it is just high pass on all of them, because all of them are also high frequencies instruments, and also I don't want their room. And let's see what I did to the group. So I routed all of them to a group, and this is a mid-side EQ, and I kind of like change a little bit the EQ from left and right to basically make it sound a little bit wider even. And after that, I have another EQ. I cut it a little bit more to 28 hertz, and then I just brought up a little bit, like 2 dB around the 5K and up. Let's see what next. And then MIDI also. MIDI, there's no, like, there's barely volume coming from the MIDI, because the orchestra is definitely in the front. So all I did was a little bit of, let's see, a little bit of the decapitator on the string stems that I have here, which is the MIDI, of course, and another a little bit of high frequencies just to add to this stem, which is the MIDI strings. Because again, that's a very exciting part, so definitely it needed those highs and a little bit of saturations, but that's it. And then yeah, that's it, that's mainly it. And then after all of this, I send all of the groups, I send all the instruments to one string group. Now on this one I have a little bit of plugins that I put in, but again, they're very, very, very mild and not a lot of processing on them. So let's see what I did here. So mid-side EQ, just different EQ on each side to make the whole string section sound even wider. So basically what we're trying to achieve on every orchestra, to make it sound as big as we can, as wide as we can. Of course, there's always some rules that we need to stick to. So you need some stuff in the middle, so it depends on the arrangement. If you don't have any instrument to cover the center, then definitely you need to take this into consideration and think how much wide you need it, because you don't want to create some kind of a hole in the center. So it definitely depends, but this piece like has a lot of synths, a lot of bass as well, so I have a lot of information in the center, which is why the strings and the brass and a lot of the orchestra can sit in the side. So after that I put another mid-side EQ again, just to add a little bit more high frequencies. Now let's see what I did for the reverb. So reverb, I sent a few things. So let's go over to the surround. Now the surround, as I mentioned, are very far from the orchestra, so I kind of like help them, and I put a little bit of reverb on them, like actually on the group itself, so not as a send, just as an insert. Let's see what I did there. So I put the mix again, not all the way, not like almost on 50%, I'll say, and I kind of like tune the reverb the way they like it, that sound a little bit close to the room that was recorded, and this is how I enhance it to make it sound even wider, bigger. And basically I did that because I felt like it gave me the sound that I needed without sending it to an aux with, as a reverb itself, as a send. Now to the Decca I did send put the reverb as a send. As you can see, I didn't put much. Now I'll show you the trick that I like to do with reverbs. So there's a very cool trick that I like to, again, for the size and for the wide range of it. So when I sent all of the strings, as you can see here, I send it a little bit. I take the gain. If you have a gain knob in the plugin, that is a great thing to do. If you don't, then you can just add another like compressor, or just like a clean compressor, or even just whatever, just an EQ. Don't do anything to it, just use the output knob and basically just bring it up. So what I like to do is put the reverb that I like and then boost the volume of it. And why is that? Because I don't want to send a lot of volume to the reverb. I want to send as little as I can and still get the full sound. Because again, when we use and we send an instrument, it's basically send the volume of it, right? So if I really like the balance of the strings and now I want to send it to a reverb, I don't want to send a lot of volume to it because then it will change my balance. So I'm just sending a little bit so I can get the full reverb from a little volume that I'm sending. And after that reverb, I put this one, which I really like the imager of Ozone because it let me a little bit of control on specific frequencies. This is why this imager works really well for me. So as you can see, just the mid-range and the high frequencies, I basically enhanced the width of it, but the width of the reverb, not the string itself. Like if you can see here, so I have the reverb, and right after the reverb, I put this guy, so to extend and make all of my reverb even wider. And that's basically it for the strings. There's, as you can see, there's a lot of automation that I did, but again, those automations are very, very important because it depends on, I'll say it's even more like a creative thing to do, because after you have the piece and you have the balance right, then you start to learn basically your cue or your track or your piece. You start to learn it, and then you start to write the fader. Doesn't matter if you have a fader port or just in the program itself, but you just start to write and feel basically the piece. Like if you need to bring a little bit of the deca to make it sound fuller for a second, or maybe you need to bring in a certain solo instrument, or whatever it is that you need to bring forward. But this is a lot about to feel the piece and to see like what will be best for it, honestly. um, so of course there's a lot of automation added to specific groups, so like the high strings, and then the low strings, and then the deca tree, and then the surround a little bit. And after that I have entire control right on the strings, which is on this track. And I kind of like wrote the fader as well, but compare it to the whole other instruments that I did. And of course, all this automation happens after I'm very happy with the balance. I didn't touch any automation. I worked on the balance, I worked on the panning, I worked on the plugins a little bit, reverb. I set it up, I'm very happy. Then I'm going to the next folder. And then I do the same thing over there. After I finish to do that to the whole folders, what I do is very, very simple. Start to do the automation for whatever group I feel like needs to be happen. There's no right or wrong here. It's basically about what do you feel the piece needs to be. And of course, if you work, if it's your piece, then great. But if you work with a composer, or you work with, I don't know, a co-composer, which you're basically in charge of the mixing, you know, make it sound professional, then it's definitely on you to have this communication of what are the parts that needs to stick out in specific parts or segments, and what are the solo instruments, or maybe listen to the rough mix and see if you need to get close to that, and maybe enhance a little bit some of the stuff. uh, but this is mainly it. I just wanted to go over a little bit on this folder, and there's a lot of stuff to go over as well. But again, I just wanted to do it like as a very quick introduction of how it needs to be and how it needs to sound like, and of course, what are the steps. There's a lot about this template that definitely still need to cover, but we're kind of like running out of time. So as I mentioned, all of this routing is the most important thing, because at the end of the day, the most important thing for me is to have this one button where I click and apply all of the tracks that I want to record, and I just click one button and I record all the sub mixes, all the stems, and all of my stereo mix in one click away, and which I think is the most important thing. And of course, um, this is it for today. But if you guys want to stay in touch, if you feel like you learned something, if you feel like you still some stuff that you want to like cover a little bit more, definitely feel free to stay in touch. And I'll write my information here. So email is shalevalonmixing@gmail.com, and my Instagram is @shalevalonmixing. So feel free to send me any message and talk to me. I'm very eager and very it's basically a pleasure to me to like speak about it and talk and help. So definitely feel free to reach out whenever you need, whenever you want. And thank you very much. Thank you, Nordic Game Conference, to uh, bring me on board and let me do that, because I feel so blessed. I last year I actually came and did was a part of a panel to do that, and this year I had the pleasure to actually show you the session, which I really really wanted to do. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much to everyone, and have a great day.